Season 2 of Notebook on Cities and Culture is brought to you by Carl Haley and Daniel Murphy. Usually like to call direct attention to the immediate location, but I feel like this one we should because of the themes of what you do and, well, because of the segment of San Francisco this represents. Where are we?
We're at the Noisebridge hackerspace in San Francisco on Mission Street. It's a, well, they describe it as an anarchist hacker collective set up by some passionate hacker type people, but hacker in the sense of not breaking into things, but hacker in the sense of building things. And so it's a space, and in the room behind us is full of old electronics and broken printers and VCRs, and there's soldering irons, and there's a wood shop, and there's a sewing room, and people come here and just build stuff.
Right. You can just show up and make things. It's a almost utopian idea, is it not?
It really is. It is. And there's a donation box up front. And somehow they get by.
And we'll see how good a recording space it is. It seems fine right now. The show, by the way, it is Notebook on Cities and Culture. I'm Colin Marshall, and I am sitting down here at Noisebridge in the Mission in San Francisco with Stan James, whom you may know from his blog, Wandering Stan. You may know, well, you will know from his podcast only just launched, The Seventh Kingdom, or you might know him as a founder of the Boulder-based startup Lijit, which I just learned how to pronounce, or I learned that I've been pronouncing it correctly. And he leads a technological and an interestingly classical life as well, which you can get a sense of if you read his writings. And you're also working on a book, if I'm not mistaken, the theme of which is, I don't want to mangle it. I'm aware of the theme, but how do you put it?
It changes from time to time, but basically it's about how technology fits in with our brains, sort of like the rough cut of when I was working at Lijit, I was always noticing how my cognitive science studies would come in, like, oh, how does advertising actually work in the brain? Like, we know it works, but what's actually happening in the brain? And why are games fun anyways? And, people spend millions of hours on Zynga, but why is it actually fun? And, why are cat videos so great? And what does it mean that people spend all this time on their phones?
Let me pause about the cat videos. What do you know about the addiction of cat videos, by the way? I feel like if this is in the zeitgeist now, and what answers can you offer for the cat videos?
The first pass sort of psychological answer, first pass answer would be that it's a case of a supernormal stimuli, that as humans we are sort of trained to respond to cuteness, and the scientists have can identify what cuteness is. Big eyes, looking like infantile, looking young, and cat videos kind of, I think, play into this like perfect cuteness thing, which we are programmed to respond to. There's this great book by Deirdre Barrett just about supernormal stimuli. And she talks about how other animals have this too. Like there's a case of, a gorilla adopted, was it a dog or something? It's young and it's cute and it's sort of built into us. We take care of things which are young and cute.
Or we watch them on YouTube.
Exactly, especially
it's sort of good enough, in a haunting way, good enough for some people.
Yeah.
And I didn't mean to derail you with the cats. You can go on.
No, the cats are great. So yeah, that's the basic idea of the book of just how I guess it's like how technology and the brain are becoming interlinked. The interplay between it is getting tighter and tighter these days. And where did it come from and where is it going?
In an interview I've recorded here in San Francisco to be aired earlier than this one, the guest did bring up this term gamification as a big Silicon Valley term now, and I forgot about it, but I guess I have heard it now and again. But you have experience not just of gamification, but of actually making games, early multiplayer games on the web, correct?
My first job out of college in the mid-'90s, I made some of the first web-based games that you could play in a browser. Similar kind of to like the Farmville type games we see now. We saw that they were incredibly addictive we couldn't figure out a way to make money off of them. So unfortunately, they just went away after a few years. But yeah, it was, I remember we were onto something when I was making this game, which was like a web-based version of a shareware game I had written in high school, but now
good old shareware, by the way, I remember.
Yeah, and it was on the web, so now any number of people could play it, and I knew that we had some good people about playing it. And then first, a friend of mine from high school, he said, "Hey, have you seen me, in UltraCore?" And that was the name of the game. And I said, "Well, no, I don't know your player name." And he said, "I'm winning the game. I'm number one." And found out that he had been spending 4 to 5 hours a day on this game. And his girlfriend, now his wife, still bears me a grudge, I think, that he just disappeared from her life for several weeks. And that was a sign that, this thing is kind of addictive and moving beyond just I made something fun for my friends realm.
What do you think he was responding to in UltraCore that kept him coming back in the way that maybe only World of Warcraft addiction these days or a few years ago could match?
There's a sense of accomplishment, of course, and whenever you find something that you're good at, you want to keep doing it because you feel like, hey, I found something that I'm good. Combined with, I think, a sense of what they call it, loss aversion. I think that once you've invested in something, you don't want to lose it, and that game, much like many games today, is structured so that if you don't play for a day, you lose a lot. Whoever is close to you is going to pass you up, and so you always think like, maybe I'll stop today or take today off. But then you think, if I do that, the last weeks have been for nothing, and so it keeps raising the stakes every day. Yeah.
Now, do you play online games yourself? I feel like it would be hard to do anything else with the way that, like a drug, they have developed the addictiveness so far that today, if you play a popular multiplayer game, you're kind of in that primarily. Like everything else becomes secondary.
Back when I was making games, I used to tell people, like, I'm a pusher, not a user.
Yeah, you don't get high on your own supply.
Right. I must admit, I don't think I'm addicted. Classic. I don't think I'm addicted, but I do draw something. I play it with my mom and one other friend, and it has become a nice little diversion a couple times a day, and it's a way to lightly stay in touch with them.
Now, draw something. I've never played it, but you play that game through Facebook, right? Is it, or do you not? Or do you play it
iPhone or mobile phone? Yeah.
Okay, so there's that. That ruins the awesome setup I had in mind because you don't play it through Facebook. But it does seem like Facebook and a game like Draw Something, shall we say, they're exploiting the same. Are they exploiting the same type of addictiveness? Both addictive, both technology, same type of addictiveness being harnessed, shall we say?
At least they dovetail together very well. Some of Farmville and other properties like that, their explosive growth was driven by sort of a social exploit that if someone invites you to play a game, you feel very rude to say, "Oh, no, thank you." Right. And a lot of the games would they would invite you without telling you they were inviting your friends, or in order to unlock the next level or something, you needed to invite 5 more friends. And you don't think it's really that bad.
Pyramid scheme.
Totally. Yeah. So I think that definitely was an exploit that they used.
As someone who was making games for the quote unquote early web, what do you think about how the fact that nothing was really addicting anybody? There was the players of UltraCore like your friend, but nothing on the internet was really that addictive to anybody in 1996. These days, seems like everything on the internet is addictive to everybody in some sense. What went on there?
I think, well, in the early days, the costs were just too high. And I don't mean just you had to pay by the minute on your AOL, but just the cost of, you had to go home and sit in front of your computer, and you had to make sure no one else was on the phone line, and you had to wait a minute for every page to load. That on the user side, combined with on the production side, there wasn't any real way to make money from it. So we made these games. We had thousands of people playing them, and we, after a couple years, the company shut it down because we couldn't make money. In the meantime, the costs to the user have dropped. The laptops are practically disposable, and the cost in terms of I don't have to go home to play a game. I just have to reach in my pocket to play a game. And then on the other side, there's now business models. Zynga famously just, you can just buy, cows in Farmville or buy credits, whatever, or advertising. If you can make a good cat video, you can make money from the advertising.
So I would ask what people are making on cat videos, but something tells me I don't want to know, no matter what the figure is.
Right, and there it's not the makers of the cat videos that are probably making that much money. It's more, someone like YouTube can accumulate millions of videos, some of which are cat videos, some of which will get millions of viewers. And at that scale, they can actually make a decent amount of money on advertising.
Now, broad question about San Francisco, but for somebody who is a tech guy like yourself with strong tech interests and also a wanderer, someone with a variety of interests besides, is San Francisco the American city to be in?
Definitely, yes. There's no question, really.
No second place. It's just this is where you're going to have to be if you have that combination within America.
Within America, there are second places. There are other, I don't know which would be officially second place between Seattle, New York, Austin, Boulder, even my old hometown. They're all really good, but not even San Francisco. I would say Silicon Valley is at the top. And
for someone with a variety of interests, Silicon Valley may not cut it. Maybe it does. I don't know.
That's true, and that's one of the reasons why I'm in San Francisco and not there. Is that tech is not my entire life, and in San Francisco, you get tech combined with plays and culture like that. You get different swaths of people. You have homeless people. You've got designers. You have normal accountants. In Silicon Valley, it's a bit more homogenous.
I would imagine the burritos are better right here in the Mission, too. I don't know if you're a fan of those, but it seems to be the local cuisine. You can inform me if I'm wrong.
In my experience, these are the best burritos, yes.
I guess as a slight digression, what should an outsider look for in the best Mission-style burrito? I know you haven't been here that long yourself, but you'll know more than I would, or someone who's never been here who wants to try one.
I used to just get chicken burritos, but that's not really the traditional Mexican thing. If you do the pork or the beef, that's usually much better. I don't know if it's authentic, but I'm kind of addicted to having avocados in everything, and in a burrito is fantastic.
California, then, has certainly put that hold into the avocado, the sheer desire for avocados. What is the trajectory that landed you here? As you are wandering Stan, how do you trace your pathway?
Being in the tech world, you always are in the San Francisco orbit to some degree. When I was at Lijit, we were flying here at least every couple of months for business meetings, and I had friends here like Ben who introduced me to you. And
listeners, Ben Kaznoka, who you'll hear again soon on this show.
That's right. So let's see. So I was most recently in Berlin, and I'd been there for a couple of years. Working on the book. I've been there a couple of years working on the book, and I was kind of hungry to work again, on a team and on a project, that sort of thing. I was also sort of getting deeper into tech and wanting to be closer to where things were happening. I feel right now we're kind of in this sort of new wave of not progress, but at least innovation. A lot of big things are happening, and I wanted to be close to that.
On the back of what, technologically?
I think mobile has been a big driver, combined with the sheer ubiquity of the web around the world. Now you just take it for granted. It's not, do you have the internet? It's a given. Breakthroughs like Facebook, sort of, that's 6 billion or 1 billion people, which is 1 in 7 people in the world are on it, and new business models popping up with everything from advertising to Kickstarter to people addicted to Zynga games. There's just a lot of things moving right now.
Do you think it's correct to say that? I envision this as being a sort of loss of the distinction between two conditions, the distinction between being on the internet and not being on it. In 1996, you knew whether you were on the internet. In 2012, I'm always I'm rarely completely not on the internet, but I'm also rarely giving the internet my full attention. Do you see it that way? That we've sort of lost that distinction?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, I was just talking with my co-host on my new podcast. We were talking about this little movie short that came out recently called Sight, and it's about, set in the near future, and the characters have the internet going all the time, projected right on their eyes, and they're sort of always partially there. And he's a filmmaker in LA, and he was pointing out that this is a totally different world from, say, The Matrix, where it was all about, are you in the Matrix or are you out? And it was this very sort of binary decision. And the way it's kind of shaping up to be is that we're kind of always a little in the internet and always a little in the real world.
Yeah, I could never really credit the futuristic films and books that had us. I mean, I'm talking about like a Matrix, sure, but like a snow crash that had us. We were totally jacked into some experience, or we completely weren't. I forget if Snow Crash was even like that, but I remember it as being that way. It's fascinating to see what the predictions get wrong, science fiction-wise, and that seems to be the main one about our era, is they thought, probably with good cause, that we would either be completely immersed or completely out, but that's kind of the main thing we aren't, right?
Yeah, now it's much more of a almost buffet model of take the real world for what it can offer, walking around in space and fresh air and, good food. And at the same time, you can have your Facebook and your games and your Wikipedia on call.
Especially Wikipedia on call. It's like, when's the last time you heard the phrase virtual reality? Probably 1996, right?
Yeah, probably.
What happened to that? I mean, the idea just stopped being appealing, as well as the technology not going in that direction.
And now it's shifted to augmented reality, where I guess we weren't that good at replacing all of reality with a virtual reality. And it turns out that there are aspects of reality that we really like, and we want to keep that.
No huge surprise, I suppose, but the podcast, The Seventh Kingdom, named, as I understand it, after a term that a past guest on the old incarnation of this show, The Marketplace of Ideas, Kevin Kelly, used. What's the concept of this brand new show, one episode out?
The concept is to be a tech podcast, but not talking about the latest iPhone or the latest Facebook business model, but more about how technology is changing our lives individually and as a country and as a species. Of what does it mean that everyone is on Facebook? When I was in New York recently, I would say 1 in 4 people I saw on the street were staring at a phone. And is this good or bad? Is this progress? How does it change dating and relationships? How does it change game playing, religion, pornography? There's all these things that are coming into play. And are there any trends we can discern, and where is it going? And are there any sort of echoes that we can look in the past that sort of foreshadowed where we are now?
Two observations come right to mind. Number one, I was staring at my phone coming here because I was figuring out how to get here. As soon as I'm out of the BART station, it's like, okay, go down there, and kept checking it compulsively to make sure I was on the right path, which now I can't envision not doing. I only got an iPhone this year. Before that, I was hand-drawing maps a lot, and I was fine with that, but clearly those days are over. The dating thing, I very recently found myself doing this. If I suspected I was into a girl, it was ask her out now before she knows your last name, or else she's going to have an information imbalance that is staggering, and you'll know nothing about her, probably, unless she's got a big net footprint. But it's those two things you've probably heard people say to you before as well. Like those are, I would imagine those are very common in this era now. That sense that now my navigation happens in a device I keep outside my head, and now I've got to ask people out really quick, or else they'll Google me.
Are you that afraid of what they're going to find?
Nothing ashamed, but you don't want to. to turn up and have somebody know a lot about you potentially, and you know very little. It's gonna be weird. It's like celebrities, I think, feel when they have fans who have that's why they don't like it. I guess obsessive fans is because the fan knows everything, and they're just kind of a weirdo to you.
This is just anecdotal, and possibly because I just talked to a girl in a cafe earlier, that the way you sort of, instead of exchanging numbers, is let's connect on Facebook, which, to use your analogy, maybe it's like mutual exchange of full information. So there isn't the imbalance, unless of course someone's been holding back on their Facebook.
Well, this latest girl isn't on Facebook or anything, no internet presence whatsoever. So I would have really been in trouble.
then big imbalance.
Right. So ladies, if you want more power, stay off the net, I guess. That's a takeaway. But I get the sense that the way you've described your podcast, that you found existing tech podcasts or other outlets for tech type information to be a bit far zoomed in. Like they were very concerned with what's on the next iPhone. And perhaps you felt a desire to step back, to still be talking about tech, but to step back and see the forest rather than just the trees. Right,
exactly. It's especially in Silicon Valley around my tech friends, it's easy to talk about Facebook's API or their latest design overhaul. If I talk to my normal friends or people out in the world, what they're really talking about is, oh, I just discovered that my coworker is getting a divorce and I learned about it through Facebook. Or my teenage son has his first girlfriend, but they never talk. They only text. What does that mean? And that's way more interesting to me than, texting technology. It's like, how is it actually changing how people live?
Right. What are some of the observations that got you thinking this might be a theme for a whole podcast? Just things you would see in your actual life that would make you think that deserves a little more attention than I've seen it given.
Like I just said, there's walking around in New York and seeing everyone on their cell phones. Even back to the old gaming days when I would see people get addicted to a game, or not only addicted, even just playing a game. It's kind of fascinating that someone would sit in front of a computer and get angry when someone steals their spaceship. This is really fascinating. And how does this fit into the whole picture of humanity and where is it going? And getting really big and philosophical, I would wonder, I wonder if when books first came on the scene, if people had the same reservations about this. And I remembered, was it Plato and Phaedrus, or whatever, when he was saying that this new writing invention, it's totally going to ruin things and it's going to mess people up, and
people won't remember anything anymore because they'll just have it in a book. Why would anybody remember anything at all if they can have it in a book?
Right. And so it just got me thinking, we're kind of on the cusp of a similar kind of change here. And I just wanted to pay more attention to it and see what's going on.
Now, how useful, or have you investigated this? How useful is it to know the history of the ways people have reacted to technologies? I mean, we've got Plato in writing, but there's analogies, it would seem to me, everywhere. The introduction of the cassette tape and the recording industry going nuts. There's analogies perhaps today. Is that something you consider as well? Just the way people have reacted before to new technologies when old technologies were new?
I think it's very useful, especially to separate your own biases. There's that famous quote of, anything invented when you're born you take for granted. Anything invented until you're 30 is very interesting, and anything invented after that is superfluous junk. I thought of this recently when reading Alone Together, Sherry Turkle's book. And there's one sentence in there where she basically is, lamenting how people are texting and on Facebook and emailing. And now, it's not like the good old days when they would just talk or phone. And I said, wait a minute, telephone, wait a minute. She just sort of threw in the telephone with talking. And I thought, this is a clear case of bias towards, things were right in my time and the new thing is bad. And so I think it's good to sort of have that awareness. So before we pass judgment on new things, to be able to see how it was handled before.
It does seem like, I think of it this way, the amount of technologies available, it sort of segments what I do in life. Now, if you had to handle everything over the phone in 1970, now it's like, well, some things are over the phone. Some matters are for texting. Some are for email. Some are for Facebook. Some you can tweet at somebody, or there are some friends I talk to always in person, some usually on the phone, some on Skype. Like, the technologies separate and categorize everything you do in life. There's increasingly one very specific technology for every type of interaction you have. You don't really lose anything. You just have to fit each one into a technology. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think it's a challenge for people to navigate those different channels. I find myself being almost offended when I, say, get a Skype call from my parents, because they don't understand the protocol that first you have to chat and say, would you like to call? And then you call.
Unwritten rules.
Exactly. And I can tell it's these sort of, you learn which friends, like to be on GChat, and some people really don't like to be called. They only want email. And these sort of cultural norms emerge.
Do you see generational divides around technology remaining as sort of stark as they once were? It seems like today we can see that, sure, people over a certain age don't use Skype as well, but many use it very well. Or at least there's notable examples of ones that do. There's no absolute division between the generations now, it seems to me, as far as what they can use. But I don't know if that means those distinctions are going away.
Yeah, and there's still a generation of older people who can't use technology that well. There's been a lot of excitement that, like, the iPad has opened that up for people who couldn't use a mouse. And
legendary sort of from babies to 109-year-olds, they can use it.
But yeah, other generational gaps. You're right. It is the web is kind of homogenizing us. That everyone understands the language of links and YouTube and friend me. And
a term that wouldn't have made sense 12 years ago.
Yeah, I often think about like what people would think of even some of the jobs and the way we talk today. Yeah.
Right. I skipped, or rather I moved it past. You mentioned you were in Berlin. That seems like another city that is San Franciscan in the sense that you can, if you want to do stuff, it's not a bad place to be, especially if you want to do your own thing. Is that true?
That's very true. The joke in Berlin is how everyone has their project. If you ask someone what they do, they're always a musician or a writer or a artist of some sort, and then you're like, oh, but they actually wait tables to pay the bills. Right. But it's a city where people go to do projects and to make things.
What brought you to it?
Well, I'd studied in a small German city for grad school back in 2003. And then from there, I had gone on to found Lijit, which actually came out of my master's thesis. And in the meantime, most of my friends from grad school had moved to Berlin because that's the cool city where young, ambitious people in Germany move to. And at the time when I moved to Berlin, I was just feeling kind of burned out, had been a workaholic, and just needed a break. And some of my friends said, "Hey, we're moving to Berlin. Come with us." And I said, that sounds like a great idea.
I suspect, it's obviously a German city, but it's somewhat, I've never been there, so you can correct my misperception if it is one, but it seems like it's kind of a world microcosm as well. It draws from so many countries that you're in a bit of an international community when you're in Berlin. Is that true?
That's very true. Depending on the neighborhoods you're in, there's certain neighborhoods that are more international. I joke with people that when I came to San Francisco, I stayed in a youth hostel here, and I think I spoke more German in that youth hostel than I did in Berlin.
Yes. Simply ride a cable car here, and you can practice all the German you like.
Exactly. But in Berlin, just walking through the streets, you'll overhear, it's Spanish and Italian and Swedish, and a whole lot of English being spoken with various accents.
Whatever appeal Berlin has, it did seem, as you said, to do more tech projects, you had to be over here, right?
Berlin has a really growing tech scene, which is a lot of amazing things are happening there. but San Francisco still, it's just, it's the Mecca. And I think I would have gone to geek hell if I hadn't visited at least once in my life.
And the intermediary point of Boulder, I mean, that I hear that cities in Colorado, Denver and Boulder primarily, they always have sort of things they want to be. I don't know if Boulder is maybe the sort of Seattle, the Seattle of the, not even Seattle of the inner west, or maybe even trying to be the San Francisco of the inner west. What is it?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, Boulder, for as small of a town it's under 200,000 people. It's certainly the most culturally interesting and has the most going on of any city I've visited. It is a little San Franciscan in that you have the outdoorsy element of people who are into hiking and outdoor stuff, combined with a strong tech industry, and I think also combined with a smartness is rewarded. It's important to be well read and to be up on things, which is also a San Franciscan thing.
And why found a startup there?
The short answer is that's where the investor was. And the longer answer is that I had gone to undergrad there and had actually done the video games there before and had family up and down the Front Range of Colorado there. So it was a perfect sort of constellation of things. And I think it was also a very exciting time to be there as the tech community was just really taking off. The new Techstars tech incubator was started while I was there. I was an advisor for the first team or first session there. And so it really was exciting to kind of see it turn into this little tech hub that it's become.
I do wonder what you see as the, well, I won't go quite in that direction. It's because we've traced a bit of a pathway for you, and your URL is wanderingstan.com. I mean, how did you launch into the pattern of wandering? What made you a wanderer?
I'm sure part of it is my childhood. I was born in Germany, and then we grew up in Bermuda and then in Okinawa for many years. And so I grew up being in other cultures, and I mean, I was a 10-year-old running through a Filipino markets and was quite comfortable with that. And then after college, I got a stable job and did that for about 6 years, and then just really had this itch to get out and see the world again, and backpack through Asia with a friend of mine, and that's where I got the idea to do grad school in Germany, and that sort of kicked off this latest period of my life of wandering.
It seems different than, when I talk to somebody who's into tech, they don't, I mean, they often have periods of living abroad or what have you, but often they strive for a certain placelessness, like, well, if I have what I need to work, my realm is the technology, my realm is the internet. It seems for you that's not quite the situation.
Yeah, I do have a strong sense of home, even as I've changed home every several years over the past few years. I think it's very important to have strong relationships, and relationships take time. And for all my love of technology, Skype and Facebook and emailing only go so far in developing or maintaining relationships. And so it's important to really be in a place and to dig into people's lives when you're there.
I would think there's a sense in which, at least in my experience, tech enriches travel or can enrich travel, but there's also the sense that that's the time to be off the grid.
Yeah.
Which do you feel about travel and technology and their relationship?
Increasingly in the past years, I'm a more fan of being off the grid when you're traveling. It's really tempting to post photos while you're on the trip and get feedback, but I find that it prevents your headspace from really being in the place where you are. I find that as I'm traveling, I see things through the eyes of my friends back home. Oh, they would really like this or this, and that's good. But it's more important to be there with the people that you're with at that moment and to be seeing what you're seeing right there.
There is a certain envy that develops, is there not? I always think of it as as the going to college thing. If you went to college in 1960, you were really dropped into a new environment where you could have no ties, no meaningful ones to where you came from. Now, you can keep nearly every tie to where you came from. You can stay in high school for the next 2.5 years if you like with technology, which, I mean, it's cool that it's possible. It's less cool that it's done so often. The same holds with travel, does it not?
Yeah, totally. That trip through Asia was like almost 10 years ago, and it was amazing to be trekking through Nepal, say, and totally off the grid. Impossible. The only way to contact anyone was, running. I got separated from my friend. I just had to ask passing hikers if they had seen him, and that was wonderful.
Scary, but yes.
Yeah. But on the other hand, when you would meet with other hikers in the evening, no one was checking their cell phone. No one was anywhere else than at that table. And I'd recently heard from a friend who was there that now they have internet at pretty high up into the Himalayas now.
Wow. No place is safe. But I wonder, that you speak of people checking their phones, and it is something, in line for a movie or in public spaces, you do often just see the row of faces staring down into the hand and the glow coming back up to their face from their hand, or, typing, you see the one finger hitting the screen. And it seems like if you're writing alarmist trend pieces, you could say, oh, look, this is how the world is going to be. Everybody's going to be staring down into their iPhone and never acknowledging the world around them. But it does seem to me that phenomenon of everybody just looking at this fixed point away from each other, downward with the glow, that seems like a temporary thing to me. Maybe a transitional phase where we who didn't grow up with smartphones but like having them now, we get a little bit trapped by them, but the smartphone may be not the way technology looks in the future, and the people born now may be better at using them to the point where they're not so apparently zombie-like. Do you know what I mean? Well,
there's the Google Glass project, which is coming out, which should, if you believe the hype, will put the internet right in front of your eyes. And I think you're right that, like the digital natives, or people who grow up with phones, they develop their own cultural norms about, when do you look at your phone, when do you not. And,
right. I mean, you see it even, I guess, to bring back the whole generational divide thing, people above a certain age who, if their cell phone rings in a restaurant, they just answer it. I mean, certainly I don't. No one within 10 years of my age does. I don't know if you've noticed that phenomenon yourself.
So you find that younger people do answer or don't answer?
Younger people don't. I mean, they can ignore, the idea being they can ignore the phone ringing, or they can just text instead, whereas someone above a certain age who's used to answering the phone when it rings will, in what would seem to be the least suitable of circumstances, pick up their cell phone and actually talk on it. And I'm reminded of seeing this manual for the first generation of when telephones became widespread in homes, and it said one of the advisories was, when it rings, make sure to promptly pick the phone up, not realizing that people in those days would leap for the phone because it was such a novelty. Like, it's the novelty, isn't it? I mean, that's what's leading us to stare at our phones all the time just because we're not sure, what if something happened on my phone, People born now won't be so concerned that something happened on their phone, right? They'll know it's going to be there.
Yeah.
I realize we're trying to predict the future now, but it's what I assume.
I agree with you to a point that, they won't take it so, it won't be so dramatic, won't be so exciting. Getting text messages at first was like, oh, wow. And the first video Skype call was incredible, and now it's kind of like, whatever, I need to put a shirt on. Oh man. But on the other hand, I think that the little screens will continue to be the most interesting thing in the room. And whenever there's a slight lull in reality, the temptation will be strong to go to the screen.
Right. I do wonder about it. I mean, or is it like because we certainly growing up didn't stand by our phones at home just waiting to see if something cool happened, if somebody called. I mean, the phones were around before we were. It's a phone, But I do wonder with the idea of getting the screens right up in our eyes. It seems very futuristic. I don't quite know what the advantage or even disadvantage of that would be. It seems like it's a little bit sci-fi, but I have no way of knowing how I would use something like that.
Yeah, it's in that category of, is it good or is it bad? I could see, the zombie-like people, that now are staring at a screen. Right. You won't even know that they're looking on Wikipedia. It'll just look like someone stopped on the sidewalk.
It's a joke they used to make about Bluetooth earpieces. Like, right. Well, they're not schizophrenics. They're talking into their Bluetooth. Maybe the same deal. Like, well, they're not. They haven't. I don't even know what they'd just be standing there. I guess Yeah. They haven't frozen. They haven't. I think of the guy in not Lost Highway, Blue Velvet, who's dead yet just standing there. It's not that guy. It's somebody who's using Wikipedia right in their eyes. I mean, I have a hard time envisioning what that would look like. Even it's nearer than it seems. But I mean, maybe I'm just like those people who said, well, iPad. What's anybody going to do with an iPad? That's just kind of that's the one. That's the one that got away from Apple. No one's going to use that. I mean, this might just be the same thing. I don't know about you, but I don't say that about technologies anymore. When something seems dramatic, like when Apple stopped including the 3.5 floppy drive on right. iMacs, when that happened, I was like, what are they thinking? And that was the last time I said that. I think I now just kind of accept every development. What about you?
And as you were talking there, I was trying to think of examples of recent big flops. I don't know if companies have just been more conservative or if we only pay attention to the hits now.
Yeah, major flops. I mean, it's hard to think of what form they would have even taken.
Yeah, I can think of like the Palm. They tried to make their smartphone, which I guess kind of flopped. But
I mean, the Zune? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe
the Zune just an iPod clone, right?
Right. That was just it wasn't like they tried to invent something new and failed at it. They just copied something and weren't as successful. Right. So I guess this would bode well for Google and their Google Glass project.
Yeah. Are we past the age where things flop dramatically in technology? I mean, the things that don't succeed weren't very ambitious to begin with, it usually seems.
Yeah, but I think it also points to another innovation or advancement which has been happening on the business side, which is on the market research and the business model side. That I think companies, they don't have to take such a big leap now and build the factory and invest millions and billions of dollars to see if someone would like something. They can make some prototypes and see if it works. Everything starts off as beta, and so companies don't take those big audacious risks anymore.
The Segway, what does that count as? Is that not recent enough?
Yeah, I don't know. I see them all the time in tour areas.
Are they big here?
I haven't seen that many. I saw a flock of them. I don't know what you call it, over by Crissy Fields here once, but I haven't seen them that often.
And that's an interesting tech flop. The only assessment I've read is Paul Graham's well-known piece that his idea being that you don't look like you're doing any work, just standing there, and you feel like a dork riding a Segway, which might be true. I've never ridden one, but it would seem to be the most promises have been made on its part versus the promises it has delivered upon.
Yeah, that is kind of the last example of something that was supposed to be earth-shattering, changing the most fundamental thing about humanity, the way we walk. And for that, I commend it for its audacious goal.
Right. Do we have anything to learn from that? I mean, as a tech guy, is it just too much its own thing? Is it? I mean, it's a big physical product with a huge investment put into even the way it's constructed. It's not really comparable to the usual tech startup type deal, is it? Yeah,
and it was solving something which wasn't really a problem for most people.
That's maybe an important lesson, and I think Paul Graham also said. The company itself was a kind of Segway. It had a lot of money thrown at it with no market research done, so it developed in a closed sphere, essentially, where 10 guys thought it was great, and out came this sort of freakish creation.
Which is something I worry about being in San Francisco now with other technology, that I do realize it's a bubble here, and everyone I know is using the hottest iPhone app, and I have to remember sometimes, like, oh yeah, not every city has this phenomena.
Right.
And it's hard to know sometimes of what is a genuine tech, popular thing and what is just the latest fad in San Francisco.
There's a lot of fads that pass through any major city. San Francisco is the same as any of them. But how best to remove yourself from a pure tech milieu, when you need to? How often and how far do you need to go?
I mean, just having a range of friends is a big start. The tech milieu it's a subculture too, and so simply having friends here outside of it is a good start. And then I think, interacting with people like my family back in Colorado who are totally outside the tech world, and that's always the bellwether. If they have heard about something, they're like, oh, okay, it actually is reaching out into.
That's a real thing now.
Yeah. My mom read it in Time magazine. Now it's a real thing now.
I do wonder how much San Francisco is. I mean, as you've mentioned, it's certainly not all tech. There's a variety of populations here, but it's a small city. How much of the human experience do you find is available here? I think more than most cities, but how much of it do you find here?
The human experience. That's
very too grand way to put it, I realize, but hey, take it, make of it what you will.
I think it offers a really wide swath. Just yesterday, I was working down in the financial district among skyscrapers and dodging panhandlers and listening to street musicians. And then in the evening, I was just feeling antsy, so I hopped on my bike and rode across the Golden Gate Bridge in the dark and was pretty much alone up on a hill on the other side. And I mean, going to a concert in a few weeks for a friend's release party. I think there's a pretty wide swath of the human experience here.
Now, the podcast and the book, you have your eyes on technology and the way human brains interact with it. But as far as your straight tech projects, what can we include in that?
Straight tech projects. The biggest one for the last year has been working with my dad on archiving family photos. And so I've been the tech support guy for assisting him with that. And I've written some software there trying to improve that experience. I recently did a project where I have my laptop takes a picture of me every hour. And I've been compiling that just to keep an eye on how much time I spend online.
Oh, sure.
And the incredible to see one's face when you're in the throes of internet surfing is kind of disturbing.
That relates to the. I mean, you can see how your mind is interacting with technology when you're watching. I mean, what do you see when you look at those photos?
It's incredible to see the difference between the kind of engaged, I'm working on a project, I'm excited face versus I'm casually surfing Reddit or Google News face, which is very kind of zombie-esque, dead eyes.
So you're on Reddit, the face just becomes unappealing in a surface way.
Yeah. It's been a good reminder to me to I don't like the way I look when I do that, so I should limit my time doing that.
With the work you've done, coding applications to say scan old media. I mean, what are your thoughts on the transition? Is it important for quote unquote old media to get into a digital form as soon as possible in all instances, or is that dangerous? I mean, what do you think about that?
I think it's important to get certain bits of old media into digital. Sometimes it's very obvious, like my dad had wedding photos which were fading, and if they weren't copied in some way, they were going to be gone. Digital also offers advantages over physical, where, like for family photos, like we've been dealing with, in the past, grandma would have to think about, who gets the family photos.
That whole thing.
Right. And now with digital, it's like, just everyone gets a copy. And And it makes things more available that now anyone in the family who can get on the internet can look at the photos. It doesn't have to be only when you're visiting Aunt Martha that you see this particular set of photos or read the love letter that she received from Uncle Bob. And I think that's really important.
So you're not on the boat that says we better keep everything physical as well, because what if somebody unplugs the cloud, that whole thing?
Oh, no, maybe I've had too many disasters with, trying to manage my own backups. It's maybe humbling to say, but I think my email sitting in Google is certainly going to outlive my local copy. And I know this from experience that I've lost years of archives from the early 2000s and 90s to where I just don't know where it is, or I forgot the password for a whole chunk of email.
It's something we can say about tech in the last decade is maybe none of us foresaw the sheer advantage of decentralization in all its forms. I mean, of course, the internet itself is a decentralized network, but I think we're all a little bit surprised by how decentralized we've wanted our technology lives to become, wanted on some unconscious level, probably for most of us.
Yeah, I was talking with a friend about this lately, that with the hindsight, you can say the rise of the personal computer had more to do with the fact that our networking sucked than that our technology was so good. Because the mainframes in the 70s were all central computer, lots of little terminals.
Like VAXs centered in suburban Illinois, for example. You'd be typing it and come back to you in California.
Right. And in some sense, that model actually makes more sense of, you have like the super smart dudes maintaining the big computer and they're the pros and they keep it running. And everyone else just keeps their little thin terminal close to them. And the personal computer turned that on its head, frankly, because there was no way for the person in the average suburban home to connect to the big computer. The internet and the modem technology just wasn't there. And now that we finally have the network in place, we have my phone has a connection to the internet in my pocket. It starts to make more sense that the jobs of archiving and keeping backups, let's leave that to the pros back at the mainframe in a data center.
I don't want to put in the hours. I don't know if you do.
Yeah, and I've tried to put in the hours, and I always do it wrong.
You've mentioned that the time to not be plugged into the cloud is when you're traveling, but I wonder, you've got to be observing this when you're traveling to different cultures, when you're experiencing them. You're certainly keeping your eye on how they engage with technology as well, right? How much of a variety is there? Is it like, well, we're all kind of doing the same thing at different stages, or are there fundamental differences with how you see people elsewhere when you're wandering use technology or approach it or think about technology?
I'm mostly impressed at how similar it has become. That I think a lot of it has to do with just the cost. That to have a decent internet experience, you don't really need that much. Having a faster computer doesn't get you that better of a web experience.
No one cares about faster computers anymore. It feels like that's all I thought about as a kid was just I gotta get a 486. I gotta get a 486. Yeah, I gotta press the turbo button.
Yeah, the turbo button. Yeah, and so traveling to other countries, you see. No matter the economic circumstance or no matter the language or whatever, they're looking at funny cat videos too, and they're probably on Facebook too, and they probably have a mobile phone too, and it mostly makes the question in my head of, in some sense, I feel we've lost something because I really enjoy the strong cultural differences. That you would feel you were visiting another world when you went to another country. And instead, they're listening to the same pop music and they're looking at the same cat videos that I am.
Right. Are they really? Is it becoming the same stuff? You see homogenization rather than simply connection between cultures? Or hybridization, maybe. Maybe homogenization is not the right word. Do they make the cat videos their own? I don't know.
I mean, I guess there is some hybridization, but certainly I mean, I remember this way, 2003 or so, I was in Nepal, and the friend I was staying with had a poster for Avril Lavigne, I think was the thing. Oh, and I was like, who's this crazy random singer that they like in Nepal? And then later I realized, like, oh no, like she's big around the whole world. Right. And I'm just the idiot who discovered her in Nepal.
Yes, some would say you were fortunate to not have to deal with her until Nepal, but there you have it. Surprised she's big there, but I thought she was she's Canadian, right? I don't know. Right. Maybe they have those cultures, those ancient cultures have some connection.
Yeah, the ancient Canadian and Himalayan cultures, it's a deep tie.
Snow. But I mean, I'm sure like a place like, Nepal is one thing, but Tibet, Avril Lavigne and cat videos have penetrated less, I'm sure. It's harder to get there, right? But there's problems inherent in that, to say the least. I mean, you can preserve certain cultures. I mean, Bhutan is a better example, right. But I wouldn't want to have it on my conscience that I was having anything to do with the Bhutanese staying as extremely poor as they are, so that I have something to be interested in. You know what I mean?
Right. To turn it into a zoo or a exhibit, right? And I had that thought too. Like, I don't like that. I don't have my experience, as profound an experience as I do, but I can't deny, I can't deny the appeal of the cat videos, yes. And I can't deny the wonderfulness of having Wikipedia at my fingertips and how that must change education and open possibilities for these people.
But it's hard to imagine. I mean, it's discussed, and it seems there may be some merit to it, but I don't see the entire world slowly becoming middle-class San Franciscans. You know what I mean? That's probably not going to happen, right? Or is it?
Yeah, you're right.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm right.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe that's the, the nerds create the technology and kind of can shape its early form. But then once the Pandora's box is open, people shape it the way they want to shape it. And I think the world at large is going to, they're going to use Twitter and email and whatever comes next, however they want to.
When people pull up wanderingstand.com and they start following you, where are they going to see you wander next? Do you know?
My next trip is actually back to Berlin to visit friends there. In past years, my wandering has mostly been visiting my friends who have themselves wandered off to other places in the world.
It's a decent incentive. When they're wandering, it gives you an excuse to wander too.
Exactly, and you have a free place to stay.
Couch to crash on. I've been speaking at Noisebridge in the Mission in San Francisco with Stan James. You can go to wanderingstand.com. You can wait for his book. You can follow his tech stuff. He's got a big presence on the net, as you might expect, but he knows when to take himself off it. Stan, thanks for taking the time today.
Colin, thank you so much. This has been fun.
It's been Notebook on Cities and Culture. I've been Colin Marshall. You can find out more about the cultural creators, internationalists, and observers of the urban scene on the show at colinmarshall.org. Thanks. And special thanks to everyone who backed this season on Kickstarter: Danny Bolson, Brad and Laramie on Movies, Paul Doyle, Umberto Grant, Matt Howie, Andrew Hovanek, Mark Hines, Mary Gillander, Eric Graham, Will Graham, John French, Andrew Philippon Jr., Kimberly Hahn, Chris Kay, Andy Cooney, Mark Larson, Rebecca O'Malley, Michael O'Regan, Gail Poole, Blake Riley, Superfan Giovanni, Aidan Nullman, Adam Schaefer, Rob Schultz, Scott Schenker, Cam Smith, Kevin Smokler, Adam Sutherland, TSD, Thomas Interberger, Matt Warren, and Wayne Wright.